Hello, welcome back to another episode of Detection and Scale. Today I'm here with Stephen Gubenia, who is the head of detection engineering for threat response at Cisco Meraki. Hello, hello. How are we doing, Stephen?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you on. So the topic on this season has been really around how teams are utilizing generative AI in security operations. So yeah, I assume that you're doing some pretty exciting things here. So why don't we start with that? Why don't we start with kind of your background in automation and AI and how you got into that throughout your career and what you're focused on now? And let's jump into that.
Yeah, well, I got started as a one-man security team, doing everything from, security operations, incident response to red teaming and compliance and audit. Like anyone else, I was buried under alerts and spreadsheets and reports, audit evidence requests, and every day just kind of felt like an endless firefight. And so I started automating first reports and other repetitive workflows, tasks. And then I got into SOAR automation, and suddenly what took hours was now taking minutes. And then I had the space to tackle real threats, and that's when it clicked for me that automation. It's not about replacing people; it's about giving them the room to actually make an impact. And over my career, I've kind of focused on that, whether it was through a SOAR platform or scripting or other automation, just looking at ways to empower security teams and free up their time to focus on the real issues. Now, with the advent of AI, chat GPTs and agentic workflows, it's just another tool in the toolkit. And so we're able to integrate with current automations and workflows. So AI isn't the silver bullet, right? You still have to have processes in place, good, logging and alerting pipelines, sound detection logic, well-defined processes, and then AI can enhance all of that. If you're gonna, you don't want the garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't have those well-defined processes, you might find that AI is just going to add to the noise. I like to look at it in the way of, we do need some basics and foundations in place first. However, it's not that that's a blocker for implementing agentic workflows. I think we need to there's early adopters and people that are kind of struggling through finding ways to implement, AI in their own workflows. But we can use that as a productivity enhancer, right? So we can go and bounce ideas off of different LLMs and GPTs out there and find ways to enhance those processes, tune our detection logic. So a lot of manual, but say agent augmented, right? Where our engineers and analysts are using some GPT platform. And then we look forward to building more autonomous workflows, right? So the agentic SOC, we want say a triage agent to look at those alerts that are coming in, dynamically escalate priorities, enrich those alerts with our threat intelligence platforms and OSINT, but still having a human analyst in the loop to look at that agent workflow. And when the agent comes back and says, hey, I think this is a false positive for these reasons, or I think this is a true positive for these reasons, and these are next investigation steps that I would take, that we can have full confidence then that we have the transparency, of that workflow and a human in the loop to validate its output. And over time, when we trust the output more, you look to turn more of that over to the autonomous agent. So I think there'll always be a human in the loop at some element, but I think as we're building out these workflows, you have human in the loop early and often, and over time, as we're securing the workloads and trusting the output, then we're turning more of that over to an autonomous agent, and then just having logging through like Langsmith or something like that, where we can go back and audit later on to ensure that these workflows are still running as intended and that we can still continue to trust this output.
All right, I have 100 questions.
Sure.
That all sounds really amazing. I mean, it's very representative of what a lot of folks are building towards, this idea of agents taking most of the grunt work away from SecOps and allow people to focus on the more strategic stuff. But I want to dive into that and talk about it. So in human in the loop, like where are humans in the loop and what's been most effective for you? Because I can't imagine they're looking at every single agent's response in real time. Talk to me about how you've implemented that.
So human in the loop, if we want to look at the like crawl, walk, run. So the first thing we do is to say, all right, we're gonna implement an agentic workflow and we're gonna have a enrichment agent, right? And so the enrichment agent is now just eliminating, you don't have an analyst there with 30 browser windows open, copying and pasting, IOCs and observables into these different tools. So that's a low-hanging fruit, easy way for you to free up time for your L1s. And now you have a human in the loop early in. So in that stage, you kind of do have a human looking at each output just because it's, we're plugging an IP address into this tool and then we're getting malicious, suspicious, clean, whatever verdict. And you have an analyst looking at that and using that for making the decisions of, are they escalating or are they closing this out, as false positive, true positive. Once you go beyond that, you can start getting into more of a reasoning model to triage. So it's taking the enhanced case or alert, right? So now you have your original output from your alert, you have your enrichment, some notes in there, and then it's maybe running some other queries, right? So it's saying, hey, I have this alert, it's EDR alert, potential malware on this endpoint or, suspicious process tree. And so I'm going to now run queries through the SIM or the endpoint agent to pull other like network connections, maybe get a clearer process tree. Like, where did this come from? It wasn't just, command.exe launch service host.exe, but we found out it's actually winword.exe, launch command.exe, and launch service host.exe. And we found that Word doc came from Outlook, it was downloaded through email. So there, we're going to have the human in the loop after that agentic workflow does all of that additional investigation. So running those additional SIM queries or EDR queries, retrieving potential forensics from the endpoint. And we're going to have all of that now added back into the case as artifacts and case notes. And that's where the human in the loop is going to look. And so not that they're going to go evaluate each of those outputs saying like, did this agent follow this procedure to collect this forensic evidence? Did it run the right queries? At that point, we're already trusting that all that's done. We can go back and audit that later through tools like Langsmith and stuff. But it's just now a human taking that agentic output and saying, does this make sense? Do I agree with this? And then what are my next steps? And over time and pretty quickly, you can learn to trust that output where you could even start saying, all right, well, maybe if we have a case that's more critical, we definitely want analysts, human in the loop, maybe high as well, but we now trust for like all mediums and below, the agent can just auto close. And so we're going to trust its output and it's going to, handle these low severity and priority alerts and it's going to auto close them out. But we now have all that documented as evidence that if there is some incident that happens and we go back, we can look and say, hey, oops, maybe this agent did make a mistake. Maybe it closed something out as false positive. That's a really true positive. So now I got to go back and look at tuning our system prompts or making some other change to the agent to avoid that. And so that's kind of where I start to see us going in the future is that security operations teams are going to be not so much L1s and L2s investigating and triaging alerts, but managing a team of agents. So the agents are going to be doing the workflows and you're going to have humans kind of just going back and auditing output. So not that we're going to go look at, we had 100 alerts a day and we're looking at all 100 alerts a day, but we're going to take a weekly or monthly audit process where we're taking a random sample of those cases that were 100% handled by an agentic workflow and spot checking and seeing if we see anything that's out of the ordinary, or we just, like I say, sit back and wait until there's actually an incident and we discover, hey, there was a mistake made by this agent here.
So the crawl, walk, run analogy is really just around crawling is having agents enhance existing data. So less about changing outcomes, just more of how can we add some more interesting information to these alerts or workflows. It doesn't have to be an alert. The walk is applying reasoning models on top of alerts and making judgments and things like that. And the run is, those last two steps plus taking some type of automated action.
Yes.
How far do you go on the right side? Like in terms of action, you talked about closing, escalating, but is that the extent of it or do you go beyond that?
You can actually go, I mean, for containment as well. So in the past, I have automated store workflows that had automated containment remediation processes. So I worked at a small SOC where we didn't have eyes on glass 24/7, but we had a lot of automation where critical things would come through to, a chat interface on our phone or an email. And you can get some context of the case and saying, we'll go back to an EDR alert, for example. There's this alert, potential malware. Do you want to take network isolation? So there we had a human in the loop that you can click a button, say, yes, isolate. That would continue the workflow to do endpoint isolation, or no, don't isolate. Like maybe there's a production server I don't want to take down right now. I want to do some deeper investigation. And I think we can do the same thing with agentic workflows. So we can combine with just SOAR automation for some of that, but have that agent looking at that case data and reasoning and saying, does it make sense to do the automated containment, or does this need to be escalated for a human to review? And it depends on the risk appetite of your organization, I suppose. Whereas, do we think that this agent's going to go haywire and start isolating our entire network, or do we know that there's enough guardrails in place that the worst that's going to happen is it's going to take down this one server that shouldn't have, and it might cause some issues, but not, complete downtime of our product. So I think you could go as far right as you want. It's just a matter of, did you implement these workflows in a responsible way that you trust the output that you're getting? And I think that's pretty easy to do. It's pretty easy to develop, pretty secure system prompts and then refine those over time and give your workflows guardrails and very specific tool sets, also. So for giving it some Python tools and RAG, we know its capabilities and how are you scoping those permissions also? So do we build an agentic workflow and we just gave it like break glass, domain administrator accounts? It's got API keys that have full, write and delete permissions, or are we giving it just the permissions that it needs? So read only where that makes sense, edit where that makes sense. And then the same thing with these like containment workflows. So do we give it the ability to actually isolate an endpoint? And I don't see any reason why we can't go there with the current state of things. And I think it's just building out those workflows in a way that makes sense for the risk appetite of your organization.
Just need to hope that the LLM doesn't RMRF your root directory.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those problems existed in traditional automation. We were always reluctant to want to change something in production in fears that it would take down revenue driving applications. So it doesn't seem too different. I guess the big difference now is we can get much more intelligent with making those decisions as long as they're heavily evaled and guardrailed.
Yes.
You started to mention this a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about the tools that you've added for augmenting agents and which tools have had the highest like ROI. You can speak generally, obviously. You said RAG, so I wanted to dig into that.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on across Cisco right now in developing not only for our products, but in encouraging and empowering every employee to implement AI in their current workflows as a productivity enhancer. So, and that includes everything from using your open models out there, your chat GPTs and Claudes and such, to some internal tooling that we're also building and making available to our employees. And so we do have internal AI assistants just to help on a productivity side in normal workflows. But within security, like for detection engineering, we're already doing AI guided detection development. So there's some good GPTs out there that are very specifically based towards different SIM technologies, where you could say, hey, I'm looking to write a detection rule for this, in this SIM language to look for this specific activity. And they're pretty good at spitting out a prototype rule. So, some of the stuff it's not going to be like production ready. You're not going to be able to copy and paste that in your SIM when it's a working alert. You're going to have to change things like field names or index names or whatever. but it's still good at bouncing those ideas off, as well as documentation. So we're doing the guided rule development, but also we use the alerting detection strategy framework documentation developed by Palantir. Sounds pretty good way to document detections and pretty comprehensive. And we're using AI to help generate that as well. So we have a fully developed rule in the language we're developing it. We can go and say, hey, we're writing an ADS doc for this rule. Here's just a short snippet of the goal. Here's the logic. And then it's going to churn out that documentation for us with technical context strategy, all of that built into it. And so there's a lot of that going on right now, just those kind of crawl phases where it's this AI augmented workflows or AI augmented development. And we're working to actually build out our agent response platform where we'll have automated workflows for all of our security operations, alert, triaging, enriching, further up the stack, incident response, and then as well as agentic detection development, where we can say, all right, I want this agent to look at what current telemetry do I have, map that to a framework like MITRE. I'm using like MITRE Attack Navigator, and then say, hey, what gaps do I have in my telemetry, right? Or I have telemetry, look at my detection content library. So I have this visibility from my telemetry, but I don't necessarily have detection coverage there. What gaps should I fill based on my tech stack? So not just like, where are the gaps in the MITRE workflow, but based on my tech stack, we'll take a risk-based or like threat intel-based approach and say, this is my industry, this is my tech stack, these are the threat actors I'm worried about, these are their main techniques that they use. We have gaps there, so let's look to fill that in. And that's a little more of an uphill battle, I think. I think there's a lot of vendors out there that are focusing either on one of two aspects. So they're either focusing solely on those low level, like L1, L2 type tasks of enrichment and triage, or they're going all the way on the other end of, hey, we have this agentic platform that's going to find, APT, whatever in your environment that your current alerting monitoring is not finding. I don't think there's a lot of focus on how do we find those security gaps and how do we fill those security gaps using that agentic reasoning. And I think there's a lot of them that they attempt to do it, but not in a great way, where it might understand that we have certain telemetry, but if you're working in a SIM that's using like common information model or something, is that data source SIM compliant? Are the necessary fields to write this detection existing in that log source? Is that log coming in consistently, or is it like coming in periodically? It's on a cron job where you get 4 hours of logs every 4 hours or something. And so I think that's the challenge here, is to build out a detection engineering agent that can understand your whole logging and alerting pipeline, understand the telemetry itself, understand, is that telemetry actually compliant with your SIM product? And is all the necessary data there to actually write this detection rule that it's going to suggest for you? And I think we're getting a little better at that. And I think the future is, we're already like detection as code platforms, right? So we can have continuous integration and development of detections using, GitHub or GitLab, and a lot of manual processes, but some automation there, right? To have maybe constant testing and evaluation of the rules. And I think when we integrate these agentic workflows into it, that's going to be that missing piece of that kind of fully automated detection as code pipeline, where it can look at your gaps and then also not only just suggest these rules, but create tickets in your ticketing system, or, whatever your workflow is going to be, and then maybe actually develop the rule itself, do, merge requests, all the things to get the detection into your pipeline.
I mean, that's a real reality today, by the way, everything you just said, because between agents like Cursor or Claude Code with MCP, I mean, it's a somewhat fragmented way of accomplishing it. I think ideally we want an agent that has repeatability in some system But the power with a agent like Cursor and tools like MCP is you can accomplish everything you just said. You can do, you can check the telemetry, you can check the integrations, you can ensure that what you're writing fits a style, and then you can compare that to the other detections in your repo. So that world is there. It's probably not in all the teams, but a lot of the tech has come a long way in the last year. So I'm curious, like, are you guys experimenting at all, or have you personally experimented at all with MCP and the options out there, or is that still sort of like brewing and trying to crawl there versus like walking and running there?
No, there's some great MCP servers out there, absolutely. But it's the other thing of looking at how secure are those MCP servers out there? Are they scoping their permissions correctly? Does it support OAuth? So I think we're there, especially from like the playground standpoint, if we can start experimenting and building, and it may not be a production ready workflow, but we can at least do proof of concepts to show, hey, this works. And then we could borrow from that. So if we don't necessarily trust that MCP fully, then do we build one in house, or do we work with, whoever stood up the MCP server to, do like a vendor review, right? So like we're going out, we want to purchase a COT solution, and we're doing vendor reviews and seeing what certifications they have and what data privacy, they have and such. So I think that's probably what we'll start seeing more going into in the future here is, or having to include those MCPs in our vendor management process of, hey, we want to build this workflow. We'd like to leverage these MCPs because then we don't have to build all this stuff from scratch, and maybe we don't have to self-host models, but ensuring that we're not introducing unwanted vulnerabilities into the environment. So implementing it in a responsible way. But there's a lot of great stuff out there. And then sometimes we just do have to build it from scratch, right? So we build our own MCPs if we don't like what's out there.
No, that makes sense. I mean, there's certainly a lot of MCPs that have like 5 GitHub stars for something that's fairly important, and you're like, I don't know. But I agree with you on the security side. I do think, and it's kind of a spicy personal take, but I think a lot of the security concerns with MCP are slightly overblown, because a lot of them could be mitigated by just running few servers that you highly trust. And the thing I'll say about the authorization and authentication is, I mean, we've been doing API token auth for so long, it's not really different. OAuth, of course, is the greatest standard that we can strive towards, but so many vendors just do API, like long-lived tokens. So, I think everyone is concerned predominantly with the fact that LLMs are quite powerful. And when you give them unbounded access to something, or if you're able to inject and influence it, like I certainly agree with all that. But there are very easy ways to avoid that, which is just like, don't run untrusted software. It's like the same problem of like malware, right? It's like, hey, don't download random stuff, But yeah, I agree with you. It's not production ready yet. Hopefully we'll get there soon.
I think it's like the early days of API is kind of what I'm equating MCP to.
100%. That's exactly correct. I want to dive a little bit more into like the human side of things. So this is a fairly big shift in how SecOps has been done for the last forever, right? Like we've always been having humans scale with the volume of alerts and data and things that we put through our SecOps program. So I guess I'm curious from your perspective, like what techniques have helped your team sort of make this shift into using agents and learning about the effective ways of guiding and directing them?
I think it's kind of a multi-pronged approach. So one, you need the top-down buy-in, right? So to get your worker bees to buy in and use, whether it's agents or just a chat interface, you have to have that top-down buy-in and say, hey, we're all in on AI. We know it's great for productivity. We know it's going to be a force multiplier. It's great for a lot of things. And so you want to encourage your people to use it, but you need to give them training. You need to give them time, right? So Cisco does a lot of that. Cisco has some different belt certification paths. So like the, white, yellow, blue, black belt, which is, I think, some great certification paths to start familiarizing yourself. So from that white belt level of, hey, I don't know anything. I don't know what an LLM is. I don't know anything about AI, and just starting to get that familiarization, and then working towards the more technical. And so teaching people like prompt engineering. So, hey, don't use ChatGPT like Google. It's you can, but you're not going to get the best results there. Here's ways to write more efficient prompts to get better output. And so it's kind of that familiarization training, offering that to them in bite-sized chunks. So this another thing we have is there's a lot of they do like AI Thursdays. So there's like little lunch learn brown bag sessions. And sometimes it's, hey, here's this cool thing that we're doing with AI in one of our products, or it could just be within an internal use tool. And then sometimes it's just a training. So you invite other industry professionals out there to come in and give a talk about whether it's agentic workflows or LLMs and the different tools that are out there. So a lot of that familiarization, getting their feet wet, right, and getting them to buy in and say, I think this is a good idea for me. Let me see what it can do. Is I think some people are going to be a little apprehensive. There's a lot of that, FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like, is AI coming for my job? No, it's not. So getting people to kind of understand that and then starting to experiment it with it and then seeing that, oh, what, it does help me write better emails or chat messages. It does help me outline PowerPoint presentations or, whatever it is going to be in their daily workflow. And then from the security side too, really familiarizing your security teams with not only its capabilities, but also what can AI do for security? And then how are we also securing those AI workflows at the same time? So understanding like the OWASP top 10 now for AI with prompt injection and such. But I think that's kind of what you need is you need that top-down buy-in. You need to really positively promote that message and show the benefit that it can have for the individual. So not just, hey, we're all going to use AI and the company's going to make another $1 billion next year. Like, no, like we're all going to use AI and it's going to handle those low-level repeatable tasks that you don't like doing anyway to allow you to focus on learning and growing and upskilling and, moving into some new position that you didn't think was possible before because you were buried under all this other work. And now you are 2, 3, 5 times however more productive.
Do you think in the world of agents and AI that detection engineering becomes more prominent?
Absolutely. I think so. I think there's 2 camps in detection engineering, right? There's the detection developers and the detection consumers. And it not necessarily depends on the size of the company. There's some companies that they're going to purchase tools, they're going to purchase a SIM tool and EDR agents and all that, and whatever's built in is about 90% of their detection library. Maybe they got a handful of custom written detections. And then you have the other camp where it's most of our detection rules are in-house written. And we have a few that were, out of the box from the vendor, but we've modified those or tuned those. And I think you're going to start seeing detection engineering becoming a lot more prominent because everybody's tech stack's different. Even if you're using some of the same tools that another company is, you might still have a different architecture. Things are implemented a different way. There's different workflows to secure. And it makes sense to develop your stuff for your enterprise. So just because you got 3 enterprises all in, some cloud environment, right? Doesn't make sense for all of them to have the exact same detections. Well, maybe not. Maybe they don't all use the same services within that cloud provider, or this company is 100% containerized, whereas this one's not. And so I think you're going to be able to get more granular and more specific of writing detections for the threats that are real to your organization, not just we perceive these threats, but we can really deep dive and use agentic workflows. To deep dive into threat reports, threat modeling, figure out what are the highest risks to our organization, and then how are we going to implement, where can we implement the technical controls and where we can't absolutely have those detective controls in place. And so I think we're going to see a lot more granularly written detection rules, very specific to organizations. And then it's going to come out of whether it's a combination of AI assisted detection development or 100% AI developed detections. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, especially with the detection as code becoming more and more real across different enterprises, because now you just have that ability to continually, test, refine, and develop your detections.
It's an important time. Like this is a very like galvanizing moment, I feel like, in general in tech, but I think especially in security. And I think I agree with what you're saying around AI isn't coming for your jobs, but I also disagree with that a little bit because I do think if you don't learn how to use AI properly, it's going to make it a lot harder for you to be effective. So I hope that everyone is learning as much as they can about agents and thinking about approaching it from the perspective of I'm a expert in response, or I'm an expert analyst, and I'm going to work to encode that knowledge into an agent. Because I do think there are just tier one tasks that should not be done manually anymore, and I think people have to adapt, right? So there's some middle ground between, AI is not going to come replace those jobs, but if we're being realistic, it's like we are going to automate a lot of these things. So you should figure out how to add value in this new world as an analyst, which there is a lot of opportunity for that, as you said very clearly before. Like the AI is doing the rote sort of busy work, and then your analysts are reviewing it. That's the frame of mind I think we all need to be in right now. So I'm hoping that everyone listening and people who are in this world really internalize that and start to figure out the limits of AI,
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. Yeah, I like to say it's not that AI is coming for our jobs, but it's that those who use AI and are more proficient with AI are going to outcompete those that do not. And yes, there are, you know, with anything, there's low level tasks that get automated and they're no longer done by a human. And with AI, we're going to see that more so, especially in security and in information technology. And I think we're kind of already seeing that. So there's a lot of entry level college graduates coming out that may find it a little bit harder to get, a foot in the door in a security operations center or help desk or whatever type of environment they're going into, junior developer, because is more of that being automated. But they can still come out with the skill set saying, well, I know how to build agentic workflows and I know how to use AI to augment, my own manual tasks. And they're going to be more, I think, in a better position to place themselves, in employment than anyone who's not. If they're going to bury their head in the sand, say, I think AI is a bubble and it's not going to be here. Well, I think they're going to be sorely disappointed.
Typically, we end the episode around 3 pieces of advice, but I would love to ask you a different version of this question, which is, like, what's your advice for cybersecurity teams becoming nuanced in AI? Like, how should people approach learning? I think you may have given us some hints, but I think that'd be a great way to wrap the episode today.
Yes. So there's a wealth of information out there. There's a number of different ways to start, diving in and learning. One, I did mention Cisco has their belt certification paths. So through Gen AI, they have white belt up through black belt level. The black belt level, there is a like hands-on project in order to complete it. Cisco also has a lot of other learning courses out there around AI, but there's, your other big players out there. So deep learning and Anthropic, and you got your Coursera and Udemy. There's a lot of courses out there, but some of them are better than others. And I would suggest staying with some of the major players, the stuff that's through like deep learning.ai, Hugging Face, and, Anthropic. Those, even Open AI now they're building a jobs platform to compete with LinkedIn, but they also have a learning platform that uses its school mode, I think is what they're calling it, where it doesn't just give you the answers, it kind of asks you questions and help you study. And so they have courses as well through that platform using that. So I would say my advice is there's a lot of information out there which can be overwhelming, but start, evaluate what your own and be honest with yourself of what is your own knowledge and skills. So am I a very beginner and I know nothing, to, I work with AI daily, but there's obviously a lot more I can learn. and then finding those courses that make sense, but doing it in small bite-sized chunks. I would say try to learn a little bit every day. Don't sit down, oh, I'm just gonna cram through the weekend, dedicate a whole weekend or something to this. There's too much out there. So I think small bite-sized chunks, learn every day, and just try to stay up on the news that's out there, because technology develops fast as it is, but AI is at record speeds. Like we're literally seeing machine speed with everything new that comes out daily, with agent that skims some blogs and other websites out there and gives me all the new published white papers and stuff daily. And I think on average I'm seeing like 30 white papers a day or more being published. So there's a lot, and it comes fast.
So learn the fundamentals is what I'm hearing, right?
Yes.
That's great advice. I think it's going to be really game-changing in security. So there's, of course, hype, but there's, of course, a lot of real data points here. So looking forward to that transition. And Stephen, I really appreciate your time and your expertise on the pod today. It was great to talk through all these things with folks in the field like yourself. So really appreciate the time and hope to talk with you again soon at some point.
Yeah, definitely. This was great. Great talking to you. I think it was a great conversation. And yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm out on LinkedIn. I share thoughts on detection engineering, automation, and AI and security. So feel free to reach out and connect.
Do you have a website for any of the writing, or is it just your LinkedIn, or where do you
just
publish?
my LinkedIn for now. I've thought about getting into blogging and writing. It's something that I definitely think I need to do a lot more, especially at this stage in my career, to kind of be known and make an impact, across the industry outside of my organization. So no website yet, but maybe a blog or something through Medium coming up soon.
Yes, I highly recommend it. It's honestly, writing is just such a helpful way to organize your thoughts, and it really just challenges your own skills in a lot of ways about what you know, right? And allows you to get more broad. So I'm a huge fan of writing. I love Substack as a medium too. So yeah, look forward to reading some of those. But yeah, thanks for coming on the show. It was great having you, Steven. Adios.